So welcome and welcome back, many of you. Where should I not stand? Probably about here. So Don gave me no remit, so I thought I'd talk about LFCS, now and then. But it's more then than now, and a lot of it is more pre-then than now. So the origins of LFCS lie in logic programming. So this is the thesis that I want to establish, but it's more a social than an intellectual thesis. It's really the story of how we got to form LFCS and some of the process and some of the ups and some of the downs. So where were we? We were in this glorious, Edinburgh was always sun shining in those days. So this is Hope Park Square, for those of you looking in from the Meadows. This is looking from the outside from Meadow Lane. I had a look just as I came, and it's a big building site now. It's horrible. This is what it should look like. So in particular, Rod and I and other people were in Donald Mickey's unit about there. And and over to the left there was this door, which led one to the metamathematics unit, which plays a big part in this story. Meanwhile, about 1973, Robin was out in this kind of industrial complex known as James Clerk Maxwell building, where computer science was. So as part of the story, there was many bits of what's now assembled into informatics, which were distributed all over Edinburgh. So they were out in the former pigs farm known as, for those of you who know what I'm talking about. Yeah, yes, anyway. So let's look at some of the people who were around. It's quite a list. As the Americans would say, it's a stellar list. It's actually a list of people. So Donald Mickey was a kind of, in some sense, a founder of everything, or a large part of everything. Not computer science, that was Sidney Michelson. And particularly his thing was Machine Intelligence Unit, Experimental Programming Unit, that's right, EPU. Bernard Meltzer, what's that awful thing, was the founder of the Metamathematics Unit. And Robin was around, he invented POP2, and he was doing robotics with Rod Burstall, who's my supervisor, who's hopefully in the audience somewhere. There, yeah, this fellow. Bob Kowalski was around, he was doing resolution theorem proving, and then he got into logic programming. Pat Hayes was around, he was doing naive physics. I was around. Jay Moore was around. Notice that after J there's no period. I'll come back to this point. Mike Gordon was around, but was shortly to leave to go to Cambridge, take a post. Bob Boyer was around, he's instrumental to the story. Alan Bundy, whom you all know, was around. And Rob Milner, of course. Some of these attributions are wrong, of course. There wasn't any LFCS then. LFCS isn't formally founded until 1986. Another point here, Robin, it says here, has no PhD. That is because he had no PhD. So I was talking to him at one point, and he wanted to become a professor quite naturally. He thought it was time he was promoted. It's probably very much long past time. So I tried to be helpful. So I said to him, why don't you get a PhD, Robin? I vaguely thought that might be helpful. So he made it very clear to me that this is not the way he was going to proceed. And parenthesis, I was an idiot for suggesting such a thing. And so this was an early lesson which my wife has drummed into me since then repeatedly, which is do not try to solve other people's problems. They know what they're doing, and Robin certainly knew what he was doing. So he wasn't going to have a PhD, but from him, PhDs would spring, and this is true. Okay, so those are the people. So I guess one point to say here while I'm at it is, so I'm sort of talking about LFCS in this history, but that's only part of a much broader history of computer science and informatics and so on in Edinburgh. And it's intellectually very broad, and it's organizationally completely chaotic. And it's a long story by itself, but basically, and I'm not going to go through it, involving, let's say, interesting personalities and their interactions. But from my point of view, from a graduate student's point of view, it was a delight, because there were all these different places. There was computer science, which actually at that point was still in Buccleuch Street, and earlier it was still in Buccleuch Street. But in 1973 it had moved to JCMB, so you could go there and have lectures on automata theory or whatever you liked. There was the metamathematics where all the things I just mentioned were going on. there was where I was with Rod, and several other people were sort of programming languages and semantics and natural language and things were going on. There was, where else was there? There was Bionics, which Richard Gregory had founded, which was in Forest Hill, where early neuroscience with Dave Walshaw would go on. Not yet, he was still somewhere else. And there was a guy there, I wish I remembered his name, but he was trying to understand some particular fly's brain. This fly lived at the top of Arthur's Seat, and this fly had a strong tendency to die. So every morning he would go up to Arthur's Seat about, 7 o'clock, get some more flies and look at their brains quick. And he never made a map of all their neurons. But these were early days. The kinds of things that people wanted to do were the kinds of things that people were later able to do. There was epistemics, where David Walshaw and Christopher Longa-Higgins, who founded that, were working in holographic memory. There was Christopher Waddington, who was inventing epigenetics just up the street just up Buccleuch Street. I mean, that is now a huge subject, as you'll know. There was work just slightly off Buccleuch Street in speech recognition. There's like this amazing sweetie shop. You could just wander, intellectual sweetie shop. You could wander around all these things. It was very exciting. And I'm making this not just to tell a story, but to make a point that I want to come back to at the end. So I guess that's all I want to say from this slide. So now I want to talk about Bob Boyer and Jay Moore, whom you'll all know, of course, from the Boyer-Moore theorem prover. They were there, and the first version of the Boyer-Moore theorem prover was already happening at that time. So Jay has many aspects, I guess, but one aspect to him is a slightly surrealistic aspect. I think this is probably because he was called Jay. So he's one of the few people in the universe whose initials, J period, are longer than his name. Another aspect of Jay was his mode of transport, which is this taxi you can see behind him. So he bought a taxi, and he would drive around it, and people would naturally... and he would just drive on. So, so I don't know if there's any sadistic impulse by there, but I think there's a surrealistic impulse. You know the famous painting, "This is not a pipe"? Well, this was not a taxi. Anyhow, Bob, so we had a lot in common, all of these people, and Rod and I and Robin, and we thought we ought to start meeting in the evenings. Well, more precisely, Bob thought we ought to start meeting in the evenings, and we all went to his house one time, and then maybe several times, it's hard to remember back so well. Anyway, Bob went off, I can't remember where to, LA, somewhere in LA or something. Anyway, and Rod thought we ought to call ourselves something, so now Rod's sense of humor comes to the fore. He called it the BBMS, which stands for the Bob Boyer Memorial Society. But it was nice. So the BBMS started and flourished and lasted, I think it's amazing when I was doing this, it lasted maybe for 10 years. So Bob Boyer suggested, Bob left, Rod suggested we form the BBMS, the Bob Boyer Memorial Society, and so we went to Rod's house, Rod and Sissy's house, and we went to Robin and Lucy's house alternately. I think occasionally we may have gone elsewhere. Oh yeah, I think we went to my house sometimes even. Yeah.
My house too.
Your house too. So at this point I'm not thanking enough people, and I apologise. So that we were always made extraordinarily welcome. Like, huge numbers of people were kind of sitting on couches, sitting on the floor, listening to whatever it was, and we had to be fed and watered. So I think it's a very good point for me to thank Lucy, so Sissy and Lucy, Sissy, Rod's wife, and Lucy, Robin's wife. This is Lucy in the south of France. This is how she looked roughly at that kind of time. We've got other photos, but I like this one. And this is the only photo I could get from Rod, who claims there's lots more photos in the attic, and therefore inaccessible. So it's rather a formal photo of Sissy, but she was nothing like this photo. She was very bubbly, she was very extrovert, she was very hospitable, she was a wonderful person to know and be around, as was Lucy. So it wasn't just the faculty, but it was the whole families and the ambience they created. And I want to say all that not only to thank them as I should, but to make another point, which I hope I'll get to. Anyway, so we discussed anything. We even had an outside speaker, so we're really interested in biology. We thought that could be important. So Rod got hold of Adrian Bird, who's professor in biology still, and he came over and told us what genetics was and how things worked. So that was really interesting. And we met till maybe about 1985. So I guess the point is, what did all this produce? What lasting thing did this produce? And I think what it gave was a motivation and the scientific and the social basis, the kind of atmosphere of LFCS was created in all these years. This was a basis which we could use to move on, and it's a basis which made us feel we should move on, because that wasn't enough by itself. We were getting too big. We needed something more. So then an opportunity struck with the 5th generation project on logic programming, which was the Japanese Ministry of Industry and something else, MIT. They wanted to create a massive parallel computer. And it was a parallel computer dedicated to logic programming. So you need a logic programming language. They fixed on Edward Shapiro's concurrent Prolog language, but they could have chosen some other language. And they wanted to make a really big one. It was going to go at 1,000 million should be lips. Like lips is logic inferences per second. That's how fast that machine could go. It's faster than we can go. Anyhow, they did make the machine, but it didn't pan out that well. The particular version of logic programming didn't work so well with the machines because the semantics made it hard. I don't know the detail. I'm speaking negatively, but I'll finish speaking negatively. It didn't meet with commercial success. There was also a parallel work on the Lisp machine, which also got made and also didn't meet with commercial success. Because ordinary machines did so well, you're fighting against Moore's law, so you're going to lose. I mean, at the end of the 10-year period, they spent a lot of money, and that was the end of that. But in fact, there were positive aspects too. In some sense, it was before its time. You've always got to be at the right points. But from our point of view, from our very selfish point of view, this project occurred. So people got worried, because the Japanese, I'm quoting from Wikipedia, the Japanese had a reputation for invincibility. So everyone thought, oh, we'd better do something too. And in particular, in the UK, the ALVE program started. And US people recognise other things, and we all know about ESPRI and so forth. So the ALVE program ran from 1983 to 87, and there are various focus areas for the ALVE program, VLSI, IKBS, or it's really AI and its applications, you might say, software engineering, natural language processing, all of that, systems architecture, all very, I mean, these are really good topics. And we were going to fit in software engineering. And I think it was Robin's idea that we would go to ALVE. But you hear the people who are around, that's Rod and Robin from around about then. That's Matthew Hennesey, who's less well known in this context, but he was part of the founders of LFCS. The point is that he left before LFCS was officially started, and he went off to take a chair in Sussex. So he's not, in some sense, he's not a main actor, but he's a very significant actor in the prologue to it, and that's me some time ago. Okay, so I guess I'm going to read some text, which you should never do in a talk. So this is from a document. Well, it's a letter to ALVE. It's quite a long document, and it's proposing that lab be founded, and it's making the case. So we had to make a central case why what ALVE wanted to do was exactly what we wanted to do. So it says, roughly speaking, there is practice, there is theory. They depend on each other. We do the theory, and we'll help with the practice. So it says, ALVE proposes increased awareness, exploitation, development of formal methods in computer systems engineering. UK is well placed to achieve these ends because we've done lots of relevant theory. Therefore, we have to keep, as the practice carries on, we're going to need more theory, because the theory is going to inform the practice is going to inform the theory. So let's have a place which is really good for doing theory, which is going to be LFCS. So we wish to argue that a centre is needed whose primary aim is to advance computation theory, now that the theory is beginning to find application and to influence design to an extent which few would have predicted even 5 years ago. And then everything's going to be excellent. Okay, just a little joke which I came across the other day at a very nice seminar organised by Philippa. So Warren Hunt was talking there, and he said the practitioner of formal methods are called formal Methodists. So and there is a certain religious aspect to it. That's an irrelevant joke. Okay. So anyway, so here's the response from ALVE. It's a letter Oh, maybe I'll get the dates. Do we have the date? Yeah, so this letter, June the 2nd, 1984. Okay. So here's another letter, 19th of June, 1984. Dear Robin, from David Talbot. David Talbot's the head of software engineering in Alve. So thanks. I would like to confirm I am very sympathetic to the proposal. This is a positive paragraph that was put forward for a laboratory, the general aim that you described. We look forward to having you draft out in a little more detail, i.e. we look forward to you doing a lot more work. A parenthesis on new, I have to say patience, returning the aim into reality will not be simple, i.e. it will require money and will require patience and effort from us both. But he's right, he had to balance the spending of Alve against his own need to make software engineering work with other UK sources of finance. So we had to talk to Alve, we had to talk to the then SCRC, which became EPSRC, we had to talk to the university, and we had to talk to the university from the principal through the dean, through computer science. Actually, just another interesting little aside is the dean then was Mitchison, I can't remember his first name, one of the well-known Edinburgh Mitchison family who was a biologist. So I remember being in his office with Robin and maybe Rod, and Mitchison turned and asked us very seriously, he says, how many more years do you think computer science will last? So I'm seriously happy he was wrong. Okay, thanks for stimulating Dave for the excellent hospitality. So that's 19th of June, 1984. So we needed somewhere to be. There wasn't any space for such a laboratory. So Robin got it into his head it'd be great to do some building. So he was going to, see that's LFCS. Well, it might have been. So we're going to build a building on top of JCMB, and this is a bit of an architect's drawing. And I remember walking across the top of JCMB with, were you there too, Robin? Rod? Don't remember. Yeah, so we all walked on the roof and with architects to look seriously about, but we didn't actually do anything, unlike Mike. Anyway, but we might have done that. Anyway, so we got it into our head that we needed a building. We also desperately needed an assistant director to make things work. So here is a letter from Burnett. So Robin kept things moving by constantly communicating at all levels, including with the then principal, John Burnett. I'm running out of time. So what's he? I had a most useful discussion with Mr. Oakley. Oakley was the head of Alve, as a consequence of which I'm prepared to allow our proposal to go forward to Alve. That was huge. We could start moving. In doing so, however, all these letters always have positives and negatives. So negatives have to say you better watch out for points 18, 19, 23, and 24. But basically, he was saying, where are you guys going to get the money for the building? Okay. So that's a positive letter, 5th of November 1984. Here's a more negative letter, 14th of May 1985. Dear Milner. Dear Milner, thank you for your further letter. Actually, that's signed there, notice John Burnett, and now it becomes JHB. Anyway, thank you for the further letter. I think I need rather firmer evidence what additional accommodation will be made available. And what's more, unless you tell me where you're going to be, I'm not letting you have anyone to do it. So, but we desperately needed someone. We needed George, who's here somewhere also. Yeah, George. There's George. Good. George had a lot to do. And he was going to do it. So George had to formally found the laboratory. He had to become acquainted with all current details of laboratory planning, with all of the university and all of the Alve. That's point 2. He had to, where's another one I really liked? Where's it gone to? Tour industry and elsewhere to explain and publicize the laboratory, and form a financial plan for laboratory development, plan a program of short courses for industry, explore with CERC where we're going to get more money. He had an enormous amount to do. That was year 1. There's also, I think, once he'd done that, there was actually, Robin had also planned for the successive years. Anyway, we desperately needed him, we desperately needed accommodation, and unfortunately, I can't remember how we found the accommodation. It eventually became available in JCMB on a lower floor. I don't know, maybe some local arguments were made. Anyway, we found accommodation, George came, and George will tell you his part of the story. I'm not going to go further than that. But let me use my remaining 5 minutes to tell you some of the things that we did in those days and that we no longer do. And you might wonder whether we should do any of these. So, oh, sorry, I'm jumping. Sorry, I'm misorganizing myself. So anyway, so at that point, everything was hunky-dory. Robin could give his inaugural lecture in 1986. He's Computing and Experimental Science. This is a must-read. Robin's sort of being philosophical and exploring kind of the intellectual foundations of the lab as he saw them. So here's an example paragraph from that. We're beginning an ambitious program of research into the foundations of computer science. This isn't to say that we're beginning to study the theory of computation, because that's already been studied for many years. Nevertheless, it's a new kind of exercise. What makes it new is a central commitment to a double thesis. This is the thesis that justifies the word lab. What makes it new is a central commitment to a double thesis that design of computing systems can only properly succeed if it's well grounded in theory. So in that one direction, and important concepts in theory can only emerge through protracted exposure to application. And the rest of the lecture elaborates and fills that out and explores the idea of what is a science and can you have an experimental science. It's a great read. We're not going to go through it, but so maybe we started off, there was 4 of us, and pretty soon there were 2 others, I think Don and Colin, so that made 6, but Matthew went away, that's 5. But this is a presentation of Robin's when he was director, and so it's a bit later, so you see we're already expanded to about 10 academic staff, so that would be within 3 years. It grew really fast. It's kind of amazing. So he says who we all are. At that point we've got 3-way funding, so Alve and Esprit thanks to Japanese 5th generation, and CERC thanks to CERC. We've always been well funded by CERC, and I'm grateful for that. So Robin's quite clear what we're supposed to do. Main purpose, fundamental research in computation theory, 40% to make it accessible by defining and implementing tools, 30%, and technology transfer to and feedback from industry, and education, including short courses for industry. All very clear. And this was supposed to be all the different things we were doing in the lab, and they're all bubbles and connected by arrows. And if you look at some of these arrows, some of them are definitely reasonable arrows, and others are, I think, arrows just to connect things. But anyway, anyway, they're there, and that's what they are. Everything's founded in ML, which isn't too wrong, but I mean, it's not too right either, because how is concurrent systems founded in ML? I don't know. Anyway, not to worry. And look, things are really working out. We're influencing the wider world. The Viper system, formerly verified microprocessor at Malvern, and I think that was via Mike Gordon and Avra, but that was still carrying on with LCF. And this Lotus, which was basically springing from Robin's calculus communicating system, CCS. So those were examples. Okay, but what about social life? So Rod had been at Xerox Park, I don't know when, but anyway, whatever the timing is, there they had this lab lunch, and they would all sit around in bean cushions. And I actually thought, before I saw this, I thought they would all be this friendly, laid-back California bunch. But in fact, it seems Bob Taylor was the charismatic lab director. It's a famous story in its own right. Bob Taylor and Xerox Park Lab and what happened to it and what they did. There's a wonderful book you should read called Flubbing the Future, which is about what went wrong at Xerox. Why didn't they win? Because they had everything they needed to win. So it's an interesting book. Anyway, they were at Park, and they were said members receive frank and sometimes brutal feedback from their colleagues. So I think, so Rod imported this to us, but he deleted the brutal. So the lab lunch carries on to this day. So what was LFCS social intellectual life then? I mean, it just had lots of stuff, right? Just what you might expect. The lab lunch, seminars, clubs, various things of interest. Away days, we go away. I think we went to the Lyceum Theatre one day. We took it over. That was fun. And one thing we had was directors' meetings. So this is something which is long gone. But as well as the main director, all the rest of us, the founders and anyone who was a professor, with no hesitations about rank, using rank in those days. We'd meet every something, I don't remember what it was something a week or a month. Do you remember, George? A month, yeah. And we discussed what was going on in the lab. So there was quite a lot of structure for thinking about what was going on and making things better, hopefully, and dealing with issues. So here are some of the things we did. Here's a couple of industrial courses, which functional programming and standard ML, presented by those folks. And I noticed part 1, introduction to the core language, 2 days, introduction to ML modules, 3 days. I guess that was an advanced topic. Okay. Here's another one, Algebraic Specification of the Theory and Practice, Don and Angie. And this is Monday 11th, this is 1, 2, 3, 4 days on Algebraic Methods. You were serious in those days.
Oh yeah. I think Stephen Gilmore might have.
You are, yes. Okay, so you never recovered. Okay, another thing we did was we looked after our students. Except for Neil. So this is a great document. You'll find it in the LFCS reports. Oh, gosh, I have to stop talking. This is like 90 pages of exam questions. So we had a course for the students. At the end of that, there was a 3-day exam. We thought this would be better for students. They could think, they could do good questions. That was the theory. In practice, some people couldn't take it. They couldn't sleep. But I think it really was a good thing. And then as a reward, Mike let them prepare a barbecue. And then we all had, we didn't eat the students. But, but it was a kind of, I don't know what the right word would be. It was a kind of ritual, sort of, a kind of a ritual, yeah. And it went very well, and I guess any student here who was there might want to say, well, it was a good thing or a bad thing. Inside there, it tells you about what the nature of the postgraduate course was. And I think I'm probably just going to skip on now. What did they want? They wanted to be... What? Why? Oh, okay. I don't know. Anyway, basically in those days that we had a kind of... We couldn't do the American system because we only had so much funding, so we had a short and tailored to our interests educational program which culminated in this exam, and students had to go through that. In principle, if they did badly, we could ask them to go, but I don't think there was a single case of that. Okay, these are the various lab directors. I won't go into that. Thanks to everybody. I think almost every single one of them is here today, so that's really lovely. Okay. Oh, sorry, yes. Rod, I mean, you did it a bit. Okay. 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 I don't claim all the facts here are double checked. I mean, I've done what I can. This is where we are now. We started off about 5. We're now about 32 people. That's amazing. That's an awful lot of people. I think Agelos is our latest cryptographer, is our latest recruit. We still have a pretty strong social intellectual life. We've added cake. That's a main improvement. But good cakes every Friday. So this is, I was trying to think, what's been the evolution of LFCS? And it's really kind of complex. And I know I don't have any time. What do I want to... I mean, we've definitely lost old topics. No, that's not what I want to say. Some bits of old topics have lost, but they've also emerged differently with new twists and applications. And there's some of them. And there's been a huge number of new topics, like just randomly security, cryptography, quantum computing, biology, just a whole lot of topics. I mean, it's a bit hard to distinguish between a topic and an application, so these things kind of merge and interrelate, but definitely, as it were, the stream of LFCS has broadened out into, I don't know, a river or something, to make some kind of metaphor. We're almost a department now. If you take an American computer science department, take a famous one like Cornell. I was talking to them, I said, how many faculty you have? They said 40. So we're really a department in some ways, but we're a department within this greater context of all the institutes, and all these institutes come from the other parts of work in computer science and information in Edinburgh. Yeah, so I guess I don't want to read that. I just want to finish with, instead of you asking me a question, because you can't, I'll ask you a question, which is, what is LFCS to you? So I was trying to think, what is LFCS to me? So I was thinking, well, what did Robin do? Well, he perhaps, I mean, we all did all three, but to pick out particular things, I think Robin gave us, as it were, the strong philosophical and intellectual framework that's kind of on which LFCS is built. Rod gave the community, the sense of being together, that's still there. That was his contribution, and both of these are very strong, and they remain, even although they're not delineated in a small number of topics. I still think they're the structure. And I still feel, as I felt in 1984, that there's this wonderful intellectual world with many things and much excitement and fun, and I think that's still there too. So thank you very much.